And Mom would hang it in the patio at the house. We had a house that was built in a Y or a U, and Mom would hang the bird outside in the patio in the daytime, and she could see it from the kitchen window. And she left it there. She wasn't always in the kitchen window, but it got out of the cage. Now she thinks the neighbor boy or whoever came up on the back, saw the bird in the cage, and opened the door.
Oh.
But so she got another one. And canaries, they annoy you after a while. A doctor I went to had one in his waiting room, and he had a waiting room about this big, and there's hung that bird, and it whistled or sang. It was a roller, because they have different kinds, that has different sounds, and it drove me crazy. And I took somebody to the doctor. I sat in the waiting room while they went into the doctor, and I sat for the longest time listening to this bird. I couldn't understand how the receptionist on the other side of the...
All day long, huh?
Yeah, because it drove me crazy. And I thought, oh, I'm glad Mr. Bird doesn't sound like that.
Right. Yeah, you'd walk by Mr. Bird and he'd go, "Hello, Mr."
I loved Mr. Bird. When I was back in New York and Valerie told me Mr. Bird died, I went in my room and laid on the bed and cried.
Aww.
Because she called me right afterwards.
Yeah.
And he wasn't my bird. He was your mother's bird.
Yeah. He was everybody's bird.
But he ended up everybody's bird.
And Rosie was pretty sweet. I barely remember Rosie, but I remember she laid an egg, and there's nothing in it when we checked. But yeah, I that's the only memory I have of Rosie.
But she did have 2 babies.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And one was a male, because Mr. Bird would go in the box on the one of the holes in the side that hold the water.
Uh-huh.
I took it out and I put the bed in so that they could go through that.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. Bird would go in there at night, and he talked to those birds, and one of them would say, "Hello, mister."
What?
"Hello, mister." It didn't sound as
like
clear as Mr. Bird's,
Uh-huh.
but you could tell he was learning, because he was really young. They hadn't been out of the box yet. Uh-huh. And I sold that bird to one of the girls I worked with at night. I offered it to Mom, told her she could have it. She said, "No, I don't stay home that much," because she didn't. She was always going to one of the girls, Dorothy's, Berta's, Ernie's. She spent 6 weeks in New York and whatever. And she says, "I just have to bring it to you every time that I went," or Julie. And so I sold it to Bertha, and she bought it for her husband. And I don't know, after I left the hospital, I never saw Bertha again. So I don't know how it turned out, but she had her for 4 or 5 years before.
Yeah.
You know.
Mr. Bird was 21, right?
He was 24.
24, wow.
Yeah, because he was, I think he was about 2 when we got him. Because it was kind of funny. Valerie and I walked into the into the pet shop down by by the railroad track, almost on Brookhurst, not Brookhurst,
Valencia?
Nicholas.
Oh, Nicholas. Okay.
Yeah, there's a kind of a little strip mall, and the railroad track is behind them.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a pet shop right on the end. And we walked in. We'd gone to one up by the mall, and they were not good-looking birds. So we went in, and we went back. We went right by him. He was by the cash register, and he was sitting on top of the cage.
Oh.
And I thought, when I walked by, that's the boss's bird, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So I walked by to the birds, and Valerie walked by, and there wasn't one that appealed to Valerie. It was her bird. It was her birthday bird. And so we looked them over, and there wasn't one that really appealed to her. So as we were walking out, the man said, "This one's for sale." I took it on consignment because the owner, he loves him, and he hated to get rid of him, but his girlfriend gave him another bird, a different kind of a bird, that he had to keep them separated.
Oh, okay. So
and this bird he had, you know, he had him for a while, and the other one, because his girlfriend gave it to him, he had to keep it, and they didn't get along, so he brought it in, and he says he talks, and
so was Mr. Bird his name before you guys got him then, and he already knew how to say it?
He was Mr. Bird.
Oh, okay. I never knew that.
He did all these things.
Oh.
He said a few things afterwards, but he mostly said everything. And so we said, "Well, how much?" And he said, "40. I said, "I'll take him." And so he put him in the cage, and we paid our 40, and Valerie had a bird. And she put him at the foot of her bed on a typing table, and she would cover him up, but if she left a little piece where he could look out in the morning when the sun came up and it got light in there, he'd get down and peek out. He'd say, "Hello, mister. Hello, mister.
I'm
Hello,
awake."
Mister." And Valerie would be sleeping, and she had a dresser, and the top drawer had these curlers with, they were like round, and they had brushes in them, you know, like kind of to roll your hair up.
Yeah.
And she'd get one out, and she'd throw it in, and she said, "You better be quiet." And he'd move. Pretty soon he'd get back down. "Hello, mister. Hello, mister." And she'd throw another one. "Better be quiet." Pretty soon he was saying, "You better be quiet." But he wanted out of the cage.
He never, he was always on top of that cage, yeah.
Yeah, but he wanted out of the cage, and Valerie wanted to sleep, because at that time she was taking the car taking me to work and then going somewhere. Her and her friend
Jeannie.